Okay. Well, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Rena Papadopoulos, and I'm the person who is going to be talking to you about compassion today, culturally competent compassion in more specifically. And my normal job is to be the head of the Research Center for Transcultural Studies in Health. We've had some technical issues, so apologies for starting a little bit later. But yesterday I was watching, I was attending a webinar given by the European Commission, and actually they had more problems than we normally. And you think that with all the money that they have all the technology and they have all the backup technologies to be making sure that everything is okay. But there you go. The best people can have problems. So first of all, to say that I want you all to have your mobile phone, so any other mobile device ready, because we're going to start with a little activity which hopefully you will enjoy. We've got 2 questions at this point, and we'll spend about 3 minutes for each question. So over to you, Sean, who is going to share and give you some instructions. Okay. Right, that's the 2 questions, but you need to, I think Alfonso has prepared another slide normally, which gives
I can give some instructions here. So
you need the code number, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm going to be sharing my screen, so I will be taking over from Sean in a second.
Okay, thank you, Alfonso.
So, Sean, can you stop sharing because it doesn't allow me to share?
Yeah.
Okay, so if you can have your mobile phone ready, and if you can go to this website called www.menti.com, and when you go to that website, you then use the code 65517125.
And once you're there, you can type your 3 words that come to your mind when you hear the term compassion. So we're already getting some words.
Sorry, Alfonso, what's the code again? Sorry.
65517125.
Thank you.
Are you okay? Okay. If
you
want me to repeat it, I'll do that.
Okay. No, that's fine. Thank you. I got it.
Excellent. Does everybody see this, Alfonso, as it is, as the cloud is formed?
Yeah, so everybody should be able to see this. And we only had 4 responses at the moment, so we're just allowing people to get onto the website.
To get the courage to type their words. We have 102 people in the room at the moment, but I can see caring is the big, most of you are using the term caring, empathy, care, sympathy, love, understanding. Bit difficult to read when it's moving about so fast, but it says advocacy, kindness, sincere, feelings, beautifulness, that's a nice term, concern, what does it say, assertive, warmth, listening, non-bias, understand, encourage, compassion. Thoughtfulness, I think, is supposed to be nurse.
For those of you who are asking for the code again, the code is at the top of the website here, which is 65. Sorry, I can't see it fully. 65517125, and it's at the top of this activity, the website and the code.
So the word cloud is forming nicely, and we still caring and empathy and understanding and kindness. It seems this seem to be the terms that are the most popular. Okay, friendly, feelings, listening, all of this. Remember all of these words, because we're gonna kind of talk about them later on. Okay, so maybe Alfonso, if you could freeze this cloud, can we go to the next question? The next question is about how important is compassion to nursing, in your opinion? The very important is rising very quickly. So it seems to, so far nobody said it's not important. Are you with us still, Alfonso?
Yep.
Okay, maybe you can do a quick tweet as well, in case other students might be around, might want to join us. Just click the one that you think is more near to your opinion.
I think we reached the responses as before, 60 people.
Okay, the others are not engaging. Okay, well, it's obvious, even though not all of you have voted, it's obvious that you believe, and I think even those who didn't vote probably believe that compassion is very important for nursing. And 3 people said important, which is good as well. But glad to hear that nobody thinks that it is not important. So let's just go to the next slide, because right, thank you. Of course, with COVID, we've had more than a year of COVID, of the COVID pandemic, and I think no, don't go down there. Yeah, stay there, please. I will tell you when to change. And the COVID reminded us all, in my view, that how important compassion is, because it was the time that probably we missed some of that compassion. Because if you think about all the words that you put on your word cloud, the closeness, the kindness, the listening, the understanding, the touching, the advocacy, and all of that kind of thing, it was very difficult even to communicate with the hospitalized patients who were quite sick during the COVID, wasn't it? And even when people were there and they talked, their faces were covered, and it's very, as you know, that is a barrier to communication to begin with. So things become more noticeable to us, and we care more about things that often when we lose them, and we take things for granted. So compassion for many, many years has been taken for granted in nursing, and we will see why. So this picture, I love this picture because it to me is the embodiment of compassion. And there is a nurse, and nursing, and of course it is associated with compassion so much. And there's a happy nurse, a happy patient, even though she's got a lot of pins in her arm, but she seems to be genuinely quite happy, and I'm sure hopefully she recovered very well, and the nurse was very pleased to be able to help this lady. So let's move on to the next one. The next slide, please, which is our agenda. So what we're going to do today, we're going to cover, we're going to talk about definitions of compassion, why we need to be talking about compassion. And when I used to do these lectures before COVID, it wasn't as obvious. I think maybe these days we're more sensitized to compassion than we used to before the COVID pandemic. So we are going to look at what helps and what hinders compassion. I mean, the giving of compassion. Obviously, we're talking about health workers, primarily nurses in this session. So why compassion, culturally competent compassion? The model that I have developed for culturally competent compassion. And I want to share with you some results of an international study about the views of nurses about compassion. The next slide, please. So let's explore the definitions, and many definitions you can find in the literature. Not just nursing, because a lot of people are interested in compassion, from people who are, from the religious point of view, and on the other hand, from the well-being point of view. And so there is a variety of views and a variety of emphasis in terms of the meaning of compassion and the descriptions of compassion. So let's go to the next one, please. So I just put here some kind of key notions. They are some of them fit your ideas about compassion. So I think they were in the word cloud. I remember the term feelings. So emotional. So some scholars and researchers looked at compassion as an emotion or an emotional response. Others talked about it as being synonym. They ask, or they actually, a lot of the times it is used synonymously with the term sympathy and empathy. And that was on your cloud, and it was quite a few of you mentioned the term empathy in particular. And kindness was on your cloud, and care. I think the term care was the largest of all the words there. So most of you have used the term caring or care. Now, this is an interesting question there. Is it the same as caring? We will talk about that later. And of course, there are those who think that it's a soft skill, that, being able to be compassionate is a soft skill that has benefits and is useful for carers and caring professions. My take on compassion is the virtuous one. So I look at, I'm particularly interested in the philosophical and religious aspects of compassion. And the term conscious and intentional act, that compassion is a conscious and intentional act, comes from the work that I have done on compassion, which I will share with you later. So let's move on to the next one. So compassion, of course, it was spoken, as I said, for many years and thousands of years. People have been talking and be interested in exploring the notion of compassion. In fact, the Hindu religion is very clearly talking about compassion, and it is the oldest religion in the world, sort of like almost 8,000 to 10,000 years old, their philosophy and their teachings. And so does Buddha. The Buddhist teachings are, totally encapsulated within compassion. But what and Simone Roach is a nurse theorist from Canada. I think she recently died, but she was the first person to who came up with, some of you may have heard, the 6 C's. Well, she had 7 C's, and the 6 C's, her work was kind of more or less taken over in 2012 by the Department of Health, the Nursing Department of Health, when they came up with Compassion in Practice document, which listed the 6 C's. But in terms of, they do slightly differ from those of Simone Roach, who talked about compassion, competence, confidence, conscience, commitment, comportment, and creativity. And we're not going to talk about them today, but it's just to actually emphasize what she said about compassion and competence. So he says competence without compassion can be brutal and inhumane. And that takes me back to the question, is compassion the same as caring? Well, caring is the actions that we do when we're giving, when we're helping people as nurses. And of course, you can definitely care without compassion. And if you care, if you provide care, and you can give medicine, you can dress a wound, you can wash a person. If you can do it in a detached and compassionless way, or even worse, she says that this can be brutal and inhumane. So compassion has to be, you have to be, totally within all the others, your nursing care. It doesn't happen all the time, but it should, of course. Then she says compassion without competence, okay, that's important too, can be meaningless and even harmful, a harmful intrusion into the life of the person needing help. And this means that, well, we can cry with them, we can hug them, we can feel very sorry and upset about our patients, but if we're not really, if we don't have the skills to be able to help in practical ways and to take actions to alleviate that suffering, then that we're just there to for the theater of it. So let's move on to the next one. So this is my definition of culturally competent compassion, because as I said in the beginning, this is my take on compassion. Some of you would have attended the lecture I gave about 2 or 3 weeks ago about the cultural competence, and that's the area that I've been working for many years. And it emphasizes the importance of culture for our health and generally speaking for our lives, and that caring in order to be effective and efficient has to speak to the cultural background and the cultural values and customs, etc., of the people we care for. Over the years, when I was developing that theory and that model, I took it for granted that a culturally competent, and I spoke about it when I wrote papers, it's the most compassionate way, because if you care for a person about, for the person's values and backgrounds and family and spirit and customs, etc., that means that, in my view, it was, a compassionate interest. So you will be a compassionate person. How wrong I was, because I had taken it for granted, even though I did mention it. And it took me becoming a grandmother for the first time to realize that compassion had been taken for granted by nursing and midwifery in general. Because in 2010, I had a lot of dealings with hospitals and maternity departments and midwifery, and because two of my daughters-in-law had their first child. And I was there all the time. My daughters-in-law, I have to say, their parents are overseas. They're not, living here. So I was the mother who was with them, and an ex-midwife. So I had some usefulness, I think. And I observed how the midwives were behaving, and the detached, and I call that detachment. They were detached from, they were technically correct. They gave good, competent care, but the care was void of any human feelings and any interest in connecting with a human, with a woman who is having their first baby. And the first baby is such an important occasion, isn't it, people? I'm sure you'll agree with me, especially those of you who've had your first baby, and how, emotional and intense and special it is. So it kind of bothered me for a while, and then I thought, these people are lacking compassion. So that's when I realized that I need to emphasize compassion more in my cultural competence work. And I coined the term culturally competent compassion in 2011. It was published, and which I defined as the human quality of understanding the suffering of others and wanting to do something about it, using culturally appropriate and acceptable healthcare interventions, which take into consideration both the patients and the carers' cultural backgrounds, as well as the context in which care is given. So it makes sense to me. I hope it makes sense to you, that this is what this says, is that compassion, if we concentrate on compassion and we look at it as a universal notion, yes, it is. But every culture expresses, understands, enacts compassion in a different way. And this is important for people who work in healthcare to know and understand that, not just to understand it, but to actually begin to explore it and to find what are the differences, and how can I become better at giving compassion in culturally competent ways. So let's move on to the next slide, please. One of it says, why do we need to talk about compassion if we just care? Well, I've kind of addressed it in a little bit, but let's move on to the next slide. Because at the same time that I was having my experiences and my aha moments about the importance of compassion, some very, very influential reports were coming out. And this were the results of some really scandals in nursing in particular, and healthcare in more general ways. And, you know, these things have gone, you know, poor care, cruel care, no care, has been, is not a new thing. But I think with the invention in the, you know, the 21st century has given us and the public the power to spread and to express our opinions, to disseminate information, to share our experiences very, very quickly. And this is what happened. You see on the top there, in the Mid Staffordshire NHS Trust, there was a major breach of human rights. It was reported that people were suffering unnecessarily and in appalling ways, and that lack of care, compassion, and humanity and leadership. Okay, it was reported in the Francis report. You probably have heard of this. Is now over 10 years. And we still need to be talking and to be reminded of these historical moments, because some brave people came up and they spoke about the atrocities that were happening and the poor care. People died and people were starved and people were left in wet beds and dirty beds for a long time, and now the relatives and even the patients can take pictures and share them, so that we can't cover up all of these bad practices. And this is when the 6 C's appear in the horizon in 2012, after after Sir Francis reported about his findings and made his recommendations. But at the same time, there were other scandals as well, and other reports appeared. Particularly in relation to caring for older people and people with disabilities and mental health. So it is very important, and you know, we have not stopped from having these kind of situations. They haven't totally gone away. They will never totally go away. And it is at regular intervals that, you know, there is a documentary or there is a news report in the newspapers or on the radio about this thing. So it's something that should concern us, and it's something that we should, you know, as educated people and as caring people, you have chosen to come into this profession. So you need to promote the practice of compassion and you know, respecting the dignity and the humanity of each one of us. Okay, let's go to the next one, please. So the other reason why we're talking about compassion is because you probably, and I can't, if you were in a classroom, I would be asking you questions now, but I can't do that at the moment. You know, a happy ward, a happy team, a happy nurse makes a happy patient, and there is satisfaction all around. And lots of philosophers, as I said, from many hundred thousands of years ago, occupy themselves with what is the purpose, the ultimate purpose of life. And also religions do that as well. And you know, where irrespective of what it is that you first comes to your mind, what you want, you know, what will make you happy, more money, or what do you want to do in life? I want to have a good job, I want to have a good family, I want to travel the world. But we do all of these things, but ultimately so that we're living a good life, a happy life. And you won't be surprised that I'm a fan of a Greek philosopher called Aristotle. And Aristotle said that in order to achieve a happy life, we need to live a virtuous life. And he identified, and depending what book you read, you come across all different virtues. But I have chosen these key 5 virtues that Aristotle talked about. And these are compassion, courage, friendship, forgiveness, and proper self-love. So Aristotle said that, you know, in order to live a virtuous life, we need to practice these virtues. We need to put them in, to be using them all the time, and so that they come part of us. They are just like a habit of playing football or a habit of eating lunch every day. It becomes, you know, so embedded within us that we function all the time along those ways. So compassion is not something that you're born with and automatically you apply. You have to practice it. And this is important. I'm telling you this because we're going to talk about that a little bit later, but practice. You can believe that compassion is a good thing. You can read about compassion, but unless you put it into practice, you really are not going to achieve very much. So, and the reason why we need to, well, I've said that if we practice these virtues, we will achieve the chief good, which is in Greek eudaimonia, or the ultimate happiness. Can we go to the next one, please? So the next item on the agenda is what helps or hinders compassion. So the next slide, please. So you see, science tells us that our brains are wired in order for us to be, to enable us to be compassionate. However, that neural network needs to be stimulated, to be turned on. So, and you don't, it isn't by itself that we have this ability that we become compassionate. We're not born compassionate, and we learn compassion from our parents as we grow up. We learn it from the society that we live in, or as nurses, we learn special compassion to help those people in our care. However, every virtue, Aristotle says, has an opposite. So you can put all the virtues on a continuum. On one side is the positive, and on the other is the negative. So compassion can be, of course, as I said, you can be compassionate, but on the other hand, you can be cruel and compassionless. Or you can be courageous, you can have too much courage or too little courage, and so forth. So I have some good chapters in my book about culturally competent compassion if you want to get it from the library. I think it is an audio book as well, so you can actually, and it's not a big book. It's a small book with just enough information for you busy people to go and dig into all of these notions that we're talking about now. So let's go to the next slide. So this slide represents a person who is compassionless and who if you are compassionate, if you're detached and you don't show compassion, it's like you don't really appreciate the humanity of that person. So it's a dehumanizing attitude if you do not have compassion with the people, obviously with your family, you probably have it, with true compassion with your friends, and also it should be the same for our patients. But let's have a look at this. This is based on a documentary that I watched when I was doing another lecture on compassion, and it was about healthcare assistants who provided care to older people at home. So they're the poor women mainly, were poorly paid. They had little support in or even good models, role models to learn from, and to want to be like them, giving good care. Their jobs were routine, every day more or less the same. So we can say it's a bit predictable and boring. It's not exciting. So often, most of the times, they were not really appreciated, and they were not. Nobody was kind of expressing their appreciation, especially their managers, to them. They received minimum training and very little continuous professional development. And these hardworking people, I mean, these are all the components that do not enable you to be compassionate, that's stopping you from being compassionate. They shouldn't, but we are human beings. So these people were unhappy, okay? And what does unhappy make? Unhappiness is not the best person that you want to have looking after you, right? It's not making you happy. So these are all the components, some of the components that I picked up from that documentary. So let's move on to the next one now to see the opposite. The next slide, please. Are my slides moving? There it is. So a few days later, I watched another documentary, and this was a documentary about a group of nurses and other healthcare professionals working in an emergency accident emergency unit in a very, very busy London hospital. And it was so refreshing to see how these people who were so busy were working as a team. They loved each other, and they kind of had this excellent interdependency. They would fill the gap within the work of each other, and run to the help of other people, because that was the team, that was the leader promoted these values, the importance of having those, the values of not just being compassionate to your patients, but to yourself and to your colleagues. So they had excellent role models. Their work was varied. They never knew who was going to walk through the accident emergency department. So it was exciting and interesting and different every time. They had loads of, because they were highly trained, they had a lot of freedom to make decisions and solve problems and be creative in their work. The team always was encouraging one another and appreciating one another. So they were receiving compassion from their co-workers, their managers. They had this confidence and this, really competence that comes with a lot of training and a lot of continuous professional development. And every evening, when before this people changed shifts, they used to give a report and used to say to the camera all the things that they did and how tired they were and all of that. But they were always so positive and saying how much they enjoyed their work. So high job satisfaction. So in this scenario, we see a happy, flourishing team. We see happy nurses. And this made them more efficient, more effective, more culturally and compassionately competent. So how nice to have this and to work within this environment, this compassionate environment that creates, that nourishes and people and with compassion to flourish and to be effective and so on. So let's go to the next slide, please. We are going to move on now to look at why do we want culturally competent compassion. I have already mentioned some of the reasons, and we're going to briefly look at the model of culturally competent compassion. So next one, please. Okay, we're not going to see the video because I don't think we have time. So right. So this is the model. Those of you who came to the previous lecture, or who know the Papadopoulos-Tilken-Taylor model for cultural competence, will recognize these 4 boxes and the arrows that go around. And so basically, the major constructs of the model are the 4 stages, the 4 domains. So we have the awareness domain, the knowledge domain, the sensitivity domain, and the practice domain. But the map, the content map for in each of the boxes has changed to reflect, to be more appropriate for compassionate and compassionate care. Now, that's not all that you need to know, but these are the essentials, okay? So I will say a little bit more in a minute. So let's go to the next slide. So this one really depicts the what underpins the model, and again is more or less the same with its mother model. So in terms of values, we have these come from human rights and world citizenship. In terms of principles, we use the principles of intercultural education, and you can also say the intercultural learning practice or multicultural practice as well. And the framework is those 4 constructs that I have already mentioned. The next one, please. So, what do we need to learn in order to become culturally aware and compassionately aware? The kind of things that obviously, that awareness always starts with ourselves. So you're going to ask, am I aware of my own world view and what influenced and shaped it? How do my cultural values impact on my understanding of compassion? How do my cultural values and upbringing impact on the way I treat those who are suffering? And do I treat myself too harshly when I fail? Or am I able to be compassionate to myself? So this is kind of you know, some examples of the reflection that you can have in order to become more aware, and you can obviously have more questions for the other components that we have in the awareness square domain. So let's move to the next domain, is that of knowledge. And again, these are some examples of the things that we need to ask and we need to learn about. So do I know how those people, how the people from different cultural backgrounds to mine understand compassion? And as we said earlier, the reason why I am so interested in, and I have devoted more than 10 years now to compassion, is because of my belief that we all understand it and enact it in different ways. And this is what I'm searching to find and to teach others. So do I know how similar their understanding is to mine? You have to, you know, think of a patient that you've recently cared for, and maybe ask those questions and search for the answers. Do I know what are acceptable compassionate behaviors for those whose cultural background differed from my own? I give you an example. You know, in the West, some cultures, well, my culture anyway, I'm a Greek Cypriot, so we like to hug people, and if somebody is distressed or sick or whatever, we like to embrace them, and we like to be really close and ask some quite personal questions of them. But that's not how everybody likes. People have different practices when it comes to embracing and hugging, between women and women, women and men. You know, there are different customs and different. The appropriateness of hugging is as an expression of compassion is quite is culturally different. Then I will ask, am I open-minded and tolerant about the compassion values and behaviors of others? Again, how a parent treats their child, the ways that they express their compassion differs from culture to culture. Some people smack their children and they say that's good for them because, and I do it out of love because I don't want them to grow. In other cultures, this is totally abhorrent. That, you know, so let's be open-minded and you know, if we can't discuss it with others, discuss it with yourself about where you stand about this thing, so that you can be more competent and confident when you're giving compassionate care. Can I challenge beliefs and traditions which I disagree with? Again, people think that this is not the place to go to because they are, you know, it's their beliefs and their values, but not everything that people do for the sake of love and compassion is acceptable or legal for that matter. Is my reasoning regarding knowing and challenging motivated by the right desires? So you can ask questions and you can challenge, but please do it appropriately in a culturally competent way and do it for the right reasons. Okay, next slide, please. This is about the being sensitive and the sensitivity issues that come with compassion. So how can I improve? Some examples. How can I improve my communication so that I can express appropriate compassion in both verbal and non-verbal? I was involved in a I may have mentioned it, and last time you may attended one of my lectures. I was involved in a 3-year project to create the first culturally competent and compassionate robot. And I had to create models and ways so that the robot could communicate in ways that it was appropriate to the people from different cultures. Okay, and even the non-verbals, you know, we search for the proximity levels, you know. I mean, now with the COVID, we have this social distancing, and you know, it's become in everybody's vocabulary. But how near or far you are from another person, that is culturally determined, right? So you need to be aware, and you know, we put all of these things into the robot so that so if a robot is trying and is doing it, why can't we try to learn about these things as well, humans, I mean? So can I recognize the signs of emotional suffering in people whose cultural background is different to mine? Again, suffering and the expression of suffering differs so much between cultures. And if compassion is about alleviating suffering, we need to understand that and we need to learn about it. So how do I develop my practical wisdom to be able to know and to do the right thing in a culturally competent and sensitive ways? I mean, you know, practical wisdom is something that we don't really mention in the nursing curriculum, but it is, you know, an established kind of notion that came from Aristotle, but all other philosophers who have followed have actually embraced that and is mentioned regularly. So how do I negotiate intercultural encounters to be able to deal with misunderstandings and conflict in a culturally compassionate, sensitive manner? You know, lack of compassion and lack of cultural competence can lead to wars. It has led to wars and ethnic conflict and hate and acts of hate. So it is so important. So it's not a soft skill, because soft skills are kind of like a way to express that is a secondary importance. It's a primary importance. It's more important than learning to dress a leg or a wound, in my opinion. So next slide, please. We're nearly there. This is the last domain of the model, and it is about putting all the previous learnings from the 3 domains that we've looked at into practice. So am I competently applying my cultural awareness, knowledge, and sensitivity in my practice? We have to ask all this all the time and reflect on it. Am I courageous enough to speak up and challenge injustice and human rights violations when I see them? And this is so important, and it is the unique contribution to transcultural nursing that we made when we developed our theory and our model. It is now commonplace, but it wasn't at the time, like 25 plus years ago. And this is because we are so we subscribed deeply to the notion of human rights and to the notion of equality. And we nurses have really a lot of responsibility, because if we don't speak about care that is unequal, is oppressive, is racist, all of which can lead to poor care, bad care, dehumanizing care, then who will? We have to really find the courage to speak out. And this is what has been happening, I think, in the 21st century more than before, because things cannot stay secret for long. If you don't speak out as a nurse, someone else will speak out about the poor care, and the scandal will be blow up. So, do find the courage. But I don't think we're teaching you to be how to be courageous in expressing your concerns and about these issues in an appropriate and safe way. Anyway, we can talk about this all day, but the last point is, oops, no, I didn't read the last point. Am I aware of the going global now? Because, we are nurses, they're international citizens. Everybody should be an international citizen. And we have to engage, and we have to learn about the global challenges that are happening beyond our little world and the world that we work in, because sooner or later they will impact on us, and therefore we need to have a wider vision in our professional lives. So am I aware of the crisis facing mankind, and do I think about my contribution and relevant solution? I wrote these slides like 5 years ago. What crisis are we having at this moment? The COVID crisis. Do we have good strategies, and do we have we thought about what our role and how we how we should prepare for them? No, because COVID caught us with no preparation, no PPE, not enough wards and beds, not enough medicine, not enough research on these things, because we knew these things could happen because we had the SARS not long ago. What did we do? We just think another crisis will come, and we have to be prepared. We just finished another project on spirituality support for the COVID hospitalized patients. And I can tell you, the report is on the website of the center if you want to read it. It's really interesting. And we're now exploring the notion of developing a strategic plan for major disasters, health disasters and hazards, and crisis. Very, very important. Next slide, please. I'm going to spend, I know we've passed the 5, but we started a bit late, so I need 5 minutes to run through this project that, as I said, I designed in 2014 about, can we move to the next slide, please? Yeah. Oh, here is, you need to do the other activity. It's really important. Who is going to put the slides up?
Sorry, that's me.
Oh, you're back, Alfonso.
Yeah, we finished a bit earlier, so I'm back.
Oh, that's good. Great news. Okay, let's do this, because this is important to compare with the findings of the study. And I hope lots of you, because we have 138 now in the room, I hope as many of you as possible can contribute to this, please. So in your opinion, are you being taught compassion, you should say? Are you being taught compassion?
No, it says, in your opinion, are you being taught the correct amount of compassion?
Yes, I know. So the correct amount of compassion, adequate amount, very little about compassion, and you don't know. I suppose you have to you have to have an opinion. So
just as a reminder as well, it's the same website as before, www.menti.com, and the code is different now. So it's 74214517, and it's at the top here.
So 74214517. Please, I want loads of you to reply to this. It's very important. Oh, you're not all rushing then. So we have 20 people out of 138. Click, click, click. I could send a copy of my book to someone, but it's very difficult to know who is the person who is more active. Because I think you will like it. So we have maybe 25. I don't know. We'll wait for another couple of minutes, so hopefully more of you will take part. And then we go to the next question. And then we're going to spend another 5 minutes going through the results of the study and compare them with your results. So far, most of you think that, ooh, the correct amount is surging, is winning by 1. And then we have equal numbers about adequate amount. We have 8 people who say very little about compassion. So that's about 50, 60 people who have responded so far. I think that's enough, Alfonso.
Yep. Shall I go to the next question?
Yeah, let's go to the next question because I don't want to really be too late. Have you observed culturally competent compassion in practice? Very often, sometimes, never. Okay. It seems like most of you think you have observed it sometimes. Not so often. Okay, we have about 65 people, so let's close it there, Alfonso. Thank you very much, everybody, for doing it. Well, I have to say that compassion is actually contagious. And in the last year, we have seen loads of stuff on the television. People are praising the nurses, how compassionate they were, how hard they're working. People are really supporting the nurses. The nursing profession now is, I think, probably gone up in the estimations of the public by 100%. So I'm not surprised that you have come up with saying that the correct amount. So compassion has been mentioned many frequently, and that you know that kind of correlates, I think, with your opinion that we have the correct amount of compassion in our curriculum. So moving on to the next one, Alfonso. So let's have a look what happened to this international study. Was an online survey that aimed to describe the nurses' experiences of compassion and explore the differences and similarities among nurses from different countries. We had 1,323 nurses who took part from 15 countries. As you can see, from Australia, South America, North America, a lot of European countries, the Philippines, Turkey, and so forth. So a variety of cultures. Moving on to the next one, please. I'm going to move through very quickly. Before, we administered the questionnaire to all those people. I did a pilot study with South Korean nurses, 78 of them. And these are some of the comments. The survey had qualitative and quantitative questions. So we collected a lot of, I thought this, some statements were very interesting when I was analyzed this pilot data. The Korean nurses are required to control their compassionate mind. They say their compassionate mind, they said. In general, a cool-headed nurse is perceived as a professional nurse. If nurses feel compassionate too much, then nurses might not be able to perform their duty, so they should be rational. And the last is, I wonder if it is right to take care of patients with compassionate mind in clinical environments. Of course, as a nurse, we should maintain the patient's dignity, but I think it is not advisable that nurses become too compassionate. So do these statements correlate with your beliefs and the way that you see compassion and compassion in nursing? Probably. Some of you may agree, but some of you, I'm sure that a lot of you will not, or partly agree. So let's move on to the next slide very quickly. So this was a question about the definitions. So most of the people who took part defined compassion as a deep awareness of the suffering of others and a wish to alleviate it, okay? Which is different from empathy and kindness, but no action. Moving on to the next one. So this was, do you think compassion can be taught to nurses, okay? Because at that time, people were saying, oh, you can't, even publishing things, saying that you cannot teach compassion. You're either compassionate or you're not. So, but here the majority of the nurses, the participants said that yes, you can teach it. Interestingly though, quite a number, 340 people out of 1,323 said no. And if we add the don't knows, that is quite a substantial number. So we are divided in our opinion. Moving on to next. So this one is about the question that you answered. Is it being taught to nurses? So is it the correct amount, enough, etc.? So most people here said not enough is being taught, 620. And if we add that, the 235, we shouldn't, but they didn't know. But if it was so obvious, they would say either some or the correct amount. Anyway, so that is a high number who think that not enough is being taught. And only 151 of the 1,323 people said that the correct amount was being taught. So this differs a little bit with your opinion. Well, enough with your opinions. And I think probably is because of what happened in the last 15 months or so. Moving on to the next one. This one is, do you, do you think patients prefer to be nursed by a nurse who is knowledgeable, but has good interpersonal skills? And that was really a way to say, interpersonal skills, if they're good, they will be culturally competent and compassionate. Knowledgeable and with technical skills, knowledgeable with management skills, and no response. So you can see there that the majority responded that they wanted to be nursed by somebody with good interpersonal skills. The management is very few, as you can see, and we have a few that said good technical skills. Moving on. This one is about the who influenced them to develop compassion, and you can see personal experience of compassion. That means if you receive compassion, you will develop your compassion attitudes and skills, and you will be able to provide and give compassion to others. Then we have the cultural values of the person, and we have the family. So not much difference, but nevertheless important to see how they divide. So the next one, please. They all have equivalent questions. We're asking them to give us examples in the qualitative part of the questionnaire. So they are explained, but I don't have time to go through all of that. So this is, where do nurses experience compassion? Look at this one. This is the most interesting one, I think. From my patients is number one. They're the patients give compassion to nurses. Then it is your colleagues, and look at your managers. 58 out of 1,323 nurses said the managers. And you know, only 2 countries, the 58 comes from 2 countries out of the 15 we had. All the others had 0. And the 2 countries is Philippines and Turkey. So, and this actually, this finding led me to design the second international survey, and to explore with managers their understanding and their practices of giving and receiving compassion. We have written lots of articles, and I will give you some references so you can read about them. So move on to the next one, please. Now, out of the quantitative and the qualitative data that we had, we came up with these components of compassion and the actions related to this. You remember this happened 5-6 years ago, 5 years before COVID, okay? But look at what we came up with and how relevant it is to COVID today. So it says time is important. To be a compassionate person, you have to spend enough time to listen to people, to talk to your patients, to hold their hand, obviously if they're sick and in pain or suffering, to support someone, to develop a therapeutic relationship. All the things that we are trying to do with all these poor people who are in COVID wards. Being there is the other major component of compassion, to be with patient, not just as a body, but with your mind and your spirit, with your whole being, okay, to give the attention to the person, to register the importance of the moment, to be in the moment, and to love. Some of you had love in the word, cloud. We avoid the term love because it's kind of like a bit emotional or a bit whatever, but we shouldn't really, because compassion is about love, and nursing should be about love too. So, and there are different types of loves, and there are that the Greek philosophers divide them in different types of love, right? And we'll talk about them another time. So going the extra mile came up a lot. People who went beyond their roles and beyond their duties to help another person. And this is what nurses are doing today in the, who are caring for the COVID people. And that's why they're being praised, and they're not money rewarded, but that will come, I'm sure. Because you in this kind of crisis, you realize that the common humanity, we are all in it together, we are all human beings, and we all need all of these things, obviously in appropriate ways. People reported that they volunteered in, especially in countries where they do not have national health services. Nurses are providing their services for free in a volunteer capacity. And there's lots of lovely stories about that. To talk to the family who is unable to be with their loved one. How prophetic that was. That this is what is happening, because today, in the last year, the social distance and the inability of the loved ones to be near the patients, that it was so extreme and so talked about. Defending and advocating, that's things that we talked about before, challenging the injustices, the inequalities, the stereotypes, the discrimination, promoting cultural competence, because if we are culturally competent, we know the importance of all the above, and acknowledge the uniqueness in the individual expressions of suffering. And finally, the personalization of compassion, an important component of compassion. We need to consider the individual characteristics such as gender, age, culture, socioeconomics, and to consider their health problems as well. So we cannot really, this is the context, we can't operate without knowing those things. So that is, we have published this, so you can find it. I'm giving you some references at the end. The next one, please. So these are my conclusions. They're probably very similar to the ones that I gave you before, because they are similar and they have to be similar. So I think as nurses and as human beings, we need to join hands and voices to bring back not only compassion as the essence of care, of nursing, but culturally competent compassion. And to assert that we need to be fighting for the provision of cultural competent and compassionate care for all. So you're the ambassadors now, you've learned about it, so go and spread the word. And this means that we proudly promote the fact that culture matters to our health. And it means that our right for opportunities to learn. As students, you have the right opportunity to learn, to work, to practice your cultural competence and compassion with good role models, because this is how it becomes a habit, and this is how you become, you learn the skills, as our philosophers have said. Something that unifies our concerns about unacceptable national and global health inequalities, and also represents our belief for justice without discrimination and for the right to access culturally competent and compassionate healthcare to meet our fundamental health needs. This should be it is my manifesto. It should be your manifesto, and we should frame it and put it, inside our heads, so that we remember these messages. In my view, anyway. I mean, you don't have to, but I'm here to talk to you so that I can promote these values and these issues, so that hopefully you tend to understand the importance of, you come to understand the importance of them. So the next slide has some references. I can provide some more references, what it doesn't have there. So please visit the website, because you can find the spirituality report there. You can find all the references that you like in the publication section. You can find the work that we have done with the intercultural education in nursing, program for cultural competence and compassion, and you can find all sorts of other things there. My book is missing the reference to the book, but it is just called Culturally Competent Compassion, subtitle A Guide for Health Professionals, etc. And it is published by, oh God, who is the publisher? By Routledge. And you can buy a secondhand copy for a few quid on eBay, or please, the library has lots of copies and e-copies, and you will enjoy reading it, I'm sure. So thank you very much. Moving on to the next slide. So thank you very much for listening to me today. The next session will be about transcultural nursing robotics. I haven't done leadership, but if you want me to talk about culturally competent and compassionate leadership, I can do another one after the robotics session that I do. So speak to Alfonso. Thank you for staying, all of you. And you know, we're kind of like almost half an hour more than anticipated, but obviously, I do appreciate you staying. And if you want me to answer any questions, because I'm happy to do so, and you can stay, or those of you who want to leave, please do. It's not obligatory. So, Alfonso, do we have any questions? Or
Thank you, Rena. So first of all, let me stop the recording.